The movie Earthlings. My call, kish, YouTube, subscribe. I'm so fucking scared. Let's turn out the lights. Yeah, let's put on the love lights. Quiet, movie's on.
Since we all inhabit the earth, all of us are considered earthlings.
There is no sexism, no racism, or speciesism in the term earthling.
It encompasses each and every one of us, warm or cold-blooded, mammal, vertebrate or invertebrate, bird, reptile, amphibian, fish, and human alike. Humans, therefore, being not the only species on the planet, share this world with millions of other living creatures as we all evolve here together.
However, it is the human earthling who tends to dominate the earth, oftentimes treating other fellow earthlings and living beings as mere objects. This is what is meant by speciesism. By analogy with racism and sexism, the term speciesism is a prejudice or attitude of bias in favor of the interest of members of one's own species and against those of members of other species.
If a being suffers, there can be no moral justification for refusing to take that suffering into consideration.
No matter what the nature of the being, the principle of equality requires that one's suffering can be counted equally.
Off with his head! Cook me a steak, bitch!
Racists violate the principle of equality by giving greater weight to the interests of members of their own race when there's a clash
3
between
years
their interests
before I was
and the
born,
interests of those of another
1960.
race. Sexists violate the principle of equality by favoring the interests of their own sex.
Similarly, speciesists allow the interests of their own species to override the greater interests of members of other species.
It's just fucking
In each case,
boring.
the pattern is identical.
Faces of Death is better. They show you right away fucking slaughtering animals. Watch the movie
Among the
Faces
members
of
the
Death.
human family, we recognize the
You want to
moral
see some
imperative
good
of
shit?
respect.
Yeah.
Every human is a somebody.
Watch
not
the
a
movie
something.
Faces of Death.
Morally disrespectful treatment occurs when those who stand at the power
Faces
end of
of
a power
Death.
relationship treat the less powerful
1978.
as if they were mere objects.
Faces of Death.
The rapist does this to the victim of rape. The child molester to the child molested. The master to the slave. In each and all such cases, humans who have power exploit those who lack it. Might the same be true of how humans treat other animals or other earthlings?
And that's what they used to do in Milwaukee with
Undoubtedly,
cats.
there are differences. Since
Pick up a
humans and
brick and
animals are
smash
not
the
the same
cat.
in
And
all
they made a
respects.
whole line of kids that stand in line to pick up the brick and
The
smash it
person
on top of a
sameness wears
cat.
another face.
They do this until there's nothing left but a blood puddle.
Granted, these animals do not have all
Then
the
they poke it
desires
with a
that humans
stick.
have. Granted, they do not comprehend everything we humans
Look, a
comprehend.
dookie coming out. A
Nevertheless,
dookie coming
we
out.
and they do have some of the same desires and do comprehend some of the same things. The desires for food and water, shelter and companionship, freedom of movement and avoidance of pain.
Num num.
These desires are shared by non-human animals and
Nom
human
nom.
beings. As for comprehension, like humans, many non-human animals understand the world in which they live and move. Otherwise, they could not survive. So beneath the many differences, there is sameness.
Monkey tits!
Like us, these animals embody the mystery and wonder of consciousness. Like us, they are not only in the world, they are aware of it. Like us, they are the psychological centers of a life that is uniquely their own.
Dinner time.
In these fundamental respects,
Here we
humans
go,
stand on all
support.
fours, so to speak, with hogs and cows, chickens and turkeys. What these animals are due from us, how we morally ought to treat them, are questions whose answer begins with the recognition of our psychological kinship with them. So the following film demonstrates in 5 ways just how animals have come to serve mankind. Lest we forget.
Alright, good part.
Nobel Prize winner Isaac Bashevis Singer wrote in his best-selling novel, Enemies, a love
Oh,
story.
1964, I was a year old.
As often as Herman had witnessed the slaughter of animals and fish, he always had the same thought. In their behavior toward creatures, all men were Nazis. The smugness with which man could do with other species as he
that's the way
pleased
they do it.
exemplified the most extreme racist theories.
Bang,
The principle that might is right.
bang.
The comparison here to the
Do that
Holocaust
with a
is
nail.
both intentional and
Nail gun.
obvious.
Right in
One
the
group of
fucking
living
brain.
beings anguishes
Dead.
beneath the hands of another. Though some will argue the suffering of animals cannot possibly compare with that of former Jews or slaves, there is in fact a parallel. And for the prisoners and victims of this mass murder, their Holocaust is far from over.
With all that hamburger. Hot steak in them heels. Oh, that ain't no hills, that's flatland. Yeah.
In his book, The Outermost House, author Henry Beston wrote, "We need another and a wiser and perhaps more mystical concept of animals.
Ah,
Remote from universal nature and living by complicated artifice, man and civilization
I
serve as the
believe I can
creatures through the glass of his
fly.
knowledge, and sees thereby a feather magnified.
Hey, you don't
And
want
the
to fuck
whole
with
image and
ostriches, they'll
distortion.
fuck you up. They run up to 60
We
miles an hour.
patronize them for their incompleteness, for their tragic fate of having taken
That's
form
faster
so
than my
far below
moped.
ourselves. And therein we err,
My
and
moped
greatly
only
err.
goes 55. They can all
For the
run my
animals shall not
moped.
be measured by man. In a world older and more complete than ours, they move finished and complete, gifted with extensions of the senses we have lost or never attained.
This movie's fucking boring, people.
Living by voices we shall never hear.
I seen a hummingbird before.
They
Oh
are
yeah.
not brethren. They are not
Cats
enemies.
came out and I seen a hummingbird.
They are other nations.
I also seen a flying
Caught with ourselves
squirrel
in the
too.
net
They
of
look like
life
little
and time.
monkeys. I was up
Fellow prisoners of
up
the
in
splendor and
Portage,
travail of the earth.
Wisconsin. All right, pets.
For most of us, our relationship with animals involves the owning of a pet or two. So where do our pets come from? Of course, one of the most obvious ways animals serve man is as companions. For these pets, it starts with a breeder. Though not all breeders are considered professional. In fact, in this profession, just about anyone and everyone can be
Rescued
a
mutts.
breeder.
Did you see that? I'm a mutt.
For pet stores,
Up
most
5
of the animals are
generations.
acquired
I'm
from
Hungarian,
pet breeders,
Irish, Dutch, Sweden, and German.
even if they may not know it.
my mutt.
Puppy mills are low-budget commercial enterprises that breed dogs for sale to pet shops and other buyers.
Eliminate the population of animals and have your
They are
animal
often backyard
neutered.
operations that
Spayed it.
expose animals to filthy, overcrowded conditions with no veterinary care or socialization. Dogs from puppy mills often exhibit physical and psychological problems as they grow up. Strays, if they are lucky, will be picked up and taken to a shelter or pound where they can only hope to find a new home again. An estimated 25 million animals become homeless every year.
They don't stay in the
And
yard.
as many as 27% of purebred dogs are among the homeless.
And wag his tail.
Of these 25 million homeless animals, an average of 9 million die on the streets from disease, starvation, exposure, injury, or some other hazard of street life. Many others are strays, some of whom were presumably dumped in the streets by their caretakers. The remaining 16 million die